Hey everyone, this is going to be my video on the last two corners step of the two-step method. If you're lost and you don't know what this video is about, check the description below. This is not intended to be a standalone video. This is part of a series regarding the two-step method, so check on the overview video there if you're not sure what I'm talking about here. So the last two corners alg set is actually my favorite alg set in the entire method. Again, I'll have descriptions, or excuse me, I'll have the algs themselves listed in the description below, so if you want to check those out, look in the description below. I'm not going to give any executions in this video. I'm not going to show any executions or how I did any of them because, as I've said in other videos, I have not been using this method for a long time because I haven't been solving in a long time. So my executions aren't particularly good at this point, so I don't feel any really benefit would be gained by seeing me try to execute these algorithms at this point. But I will go over sort of the concepts behind last two corners and how you use the algs listed below. Because the last two corners is actually the most difficult to explain alg sets as far as the algorithms and the cases themselves. So first of all, the reason I have an alg set for last two corners is because when you're working on the last two corners of the two-step method, that's when the cube is the most restricted that it's going to be during the solving process. So you're very, very restricted on what you can solve, and you have to make sure that any algorithm that you use preserves the relationship between the edges and the corners of all 6 other corners. So it's very, very restricted as to what you can do. So some of the algs can get kind of long-winded, but that's why you only use them for the last two algorithms, and you should only need at most 2 algorithms, but most of the time you can solve with just one algorithm. And if that's the only reason you would need 2 algorithms is because I haven't actually finished creating all the algorithms for all the cases for last two corners. So if you use this method and want to do the work for it, you can go through actually developing the algs for the other cases that don't have algs, and then you can solve any last two corners case with just one algorithm. So there's a few things that I need to talk about before we get to actually talk about the cases that you run into, and that's sort of the orientations for these last two corners. So a single corner at this stage of a solve can be in a state where either it's completely solved, where all of the edges are in the proper positions. It can be with one edge solved, so one edge is solved and the others are not the correct. It can have 2 edges solved, or it can have 0 edges solved. So 0, 1, 2, or 3 edges can be solved. So there's 4 possible states that a specific corner can be in. If all 3 corners are all 3 edges are solved, I just call it a solved corner. If none of them are solved, if there's no edges that are lined up with its corner or with the corner correctly, then I call it a dot case. It's a dot corner for the last two corners case. If it has one edge that's solved, I call it a bar case. And if it has 2 edges that are solved, I call it a plate case. So there's dot, bar, plate, and then solved. And the way that you identify a last two corners case is by what orientation you have on each of the 2 corners. So you can have, so here's a table that breaks that kind of down a little bit here. So you can have plate, bar, plate, dot, or dot cases, or you can have one that's solved. So you can have, like, one of the orientations you can run into is a dot dot, where both corners have no edges that are solved. So you can have a plate dot, where one of the corners has 2 edges that are solved and the other corner has no edges that are solved. So that's how I denote the different sort of subsections of last two corners, which you'll see in the description below. The subsections that I actually have algorithms for are the plate case, which is just a wide T-perm. That's got one case for it. I also include algs for the plate bar cases, which there are 2 cases for that. And I'll go into this further. I'll go further into this in just a minute here. I also have algs listed for the plate dot cases, which there are 3 algorithms for those. And then I have algorithms for the bar cases, of which there are actually 9 cases for those And again, I'll go into those in just a minute here. So other subcategories that I'll talk about here are the single bar, where you have one corner that has a bar configuration, the other corner is a solved corner, and a dot configuration. So if one corner it has a dot configuration, the other corner is a solved configuration. I'll go over that down in the description, or further in this video, and I'll provide algs for those down in the description below. So the other cases, though, the dot and bar dot configurations, I do not have algorithms for those subsections. So if you run into one of those cases during a solve, that's where you would need to perform a setup algorithm to set you up into a case that you that I have provided an algorithm for, and then you can solve with one alg. So those are the cases where you would need two algorithms in order to complete the last two corners step, but you won't run into those very often, based on my experience at least. All right, so let's just start working through these subsets here. The two-plate case, as I stated below, the two-plate case is just the wide T-perm. So you'd have a plate case like this and a plate case like this, and you just have to swap these two edge pieces here, which, well, effectively you're swapping the top 2x2x2 or 2x2x1 sections here, just with a T-perm using wide R moves. So I'll put that in the description below, but don't overcomplicate. That's just a T-perm with wide R moves. The plate bar cases that you run into, where you have one corner that has this plate configuration and another corner that has this bar configuration, there are two options for that. So we know that this piece doesn't go here, so this piece goes in one of these two locations, and your two options are whichever way that, or whichever piece that goes into. And so I call them plate bar clockwise and plate bar counterclockwise. So the ways you determine if you have clockwise or counterclockwise is the orientation of which way this edge piece is moving. So the edge piece that goes to this corner, which way it's moving. So in this one, it's going from here to here, so it's going clockwise around the corner itself. So this is the clockwise case. So you would use the plate bar clockwise algorithm to solve this. Now, the setup is important here because the most important thing, and the reason that the last two corners get so complicated, is because of the way that you have to set it up to recognize the case. Now, you don't need to set up this way to recognize the case. If you can just recognize the case as you see them more frequently, you get more familiar with them, you can see what case you have without setting it up. So you can have it in this orientation, and you could potentially be able to identify what case you have without actually going through and setting it up like it needs to be, identifying the case, and then executing the algorithm. So it's a lot faster that way, but this is how we denote what case you have. So you set the plate corner in the left side here and the bar corner in the right side here. The plate goes on the top layer here, so the unsolved edge is in the down layer here, the top middle layer, whatever you want to call it. It's here, not up here. And the bar case, the bar corner is set up like this with the bar vertical in the right corner here, and then you determine that by, as I said, which way the corner that still goes to this corner, the edge that still goes to this corner, which way that's moving around the corner piece here. So the next subsection listed below is for the plate dot cases. So you set that up fairly similarly to the plate bar cases, where you have the plate corner on the left, the dot case on the right corner here, and the plate is set up in the top layer there. Now, the only other restriction on how you set this up is where this edge piece goes. So the edge piece that's missing from your plate corner goes adjacent to the plate corner itself. So it goes in this spot here, not here or here. So that's how you determine, or set this up to determine what case you have. And the case you have is determined on, well, there's two subsets. So you can have what I call the two swap case, or a clockwise or counterclockwise orientation. So the edge piece that goes here, so this edge piece here, if the edge piece that's in its spot is the edge piece that goes with this corner, so if this green and yellow corner, or excuse me, if this green and yellow edge were right here, those two pieces would swap, and then therefore these two pieces would swap. So that's what the two swap case is. So if you see that, where this piece goes here and this piece goes here, that's your two swap case, and you use the plate.toSwap alg to solve that. If that's not the case, then you have a 4 cycle where this one would go here, then here, then here, then here, for example, or the other way around. And that's how you determine the case. So the way that the edge pieces move around this corner is how you determine if you have a clockwise or counterclockwise case. So this edge piece goes here and this edge piece goes here. So this goes like this. So this is the counterclockwise case that I'm showing here. And then you would use the plate dot counterclockwise ELG to solve this case here. All right, so another case that you'll see below is the bar solved case. So if you have one corner that has a bar and the other corner is just a solve, so you actually have 7 solved corners and one corner that's set up in a bar case like this. This is one of the worst ones that you can run into because there's not really an ELG that'll just swap those two. You can't really do that on a 4x4, so you have to swap this one and then 2 others. The ELG that I include swaps these 2, and it also swaps these 2 edges here. So what you have to do, because that'll basically set you up into the plate case. So you'll swap these 2 here, and it'll swap these, creating the 2 plate cases. So I'll go ahead and do that real quick. And again, the ELG's in the description below. I'm not going to go through an actual execution here. Well, I will go through an execution, but I'm not going to talk through the execution. So that solved those 2, but it's swapped these 2 here. So you just set those 2 up in this orientation here so that you can solve them just with a wide T perm. So the other one down in the description below that will have just one case is the, well, I guess technically there's 2 cases, but you solve them the same way. It's the dot solved case. So if you do your first 6 corners, one of the other corners ends up solved, so you only have one unsolved corner, and that corner is a dot case. You use actually the exact same ELG that you use in the single bar case. You just use it twice, basically. So it's about the same inefficiency as the single bar case, but you're almost never. I never actually saw one of these cases in a real solve because it's so unlikely that one of your corners will just end up being solved. It's basically like in what, an OLL skip or PLL skip or one of those. It's very, very uncommon that you run into it. So from here, it doesn't really matter what the direction is. You're just going to swap the top 2 here, and it's going to swap these 2 as well. So those 2 get swapped. You just leave those there. And so now you have one edge solved here, and so now you just set up your bar case like this just to swap. And because you didn't move those two just resolve each other, and you're all set. Okay, the final group that I provide algorithms for is the 2-bar ELG set. So in that sense, we have both the last 2 corners have a bar configuration like this, and the 4 edges, you set them up like this, where the bar is uprights in these 2 corners, and you have the 4 scrambled edges in the top here, and that's how you determine what case you have. So as I said previously, there are 9 possible cases you can run into with this, and I will go over them individually here. It's just sort of just a breakdown here of the different cases themselves. I'll post obviously the ELGs themselves in the description below, so you don't have to try to read them off of here. But this helps a bit with, this will help me a bit with how you identify the case, because how you identify the case is a very important aspect of this specific subset of algorithms. So basically, you take this leftmost edge here, that's scrambled edge here, and you track it to at most 2 steps. So with this specific case here, you track it here. So you say this piece goes here, and then the piece that is here goes back here. So you only have to track that really 1 step, and you see that these 2 just swap, and you end up with the 2 swap case of the 2-bar ELGs, and you just perform that algorithm. So another case you run into is there's the three swapping cases where they swap across like this, they swap right here, and they swap right here. So I went over the 2 swap case right there. So where this piece is swapping with this piece, I call that the opposite swap, and you would use the opposite swap algorithm listed in the description below. The other case where these 2 pieces right here that are adjacent to each other would swap, and these 2 pieces right here would swap as well, That I call the adjacent swap, and you would use that algorithm if you run into that specific case. So after those swapping cases, you run into the cases where it's just a cycle where each piece moves into a different location. And there's various configurations of those. So I've just set up one of the cases here. I'm just going to talk about them and how you identify what type of cycle case you have. Again, it's a case of following this edge here. So the case that I have set up here, this edge piece goes right here, and this edge piece goes right here. So you follow it for 2 jumps. So 1, 2. That's how you know what setup you have. So you pay attention to that. And that is the 4-cycle counterclockwise. And you just basically memorize that. It's really not that difficult. It sounds complicated, but it's not that difficult once you do it a few times. You just identify what the jump case is. It's 4-cycle, it's a counterclockwise, and that's just how that one goes. Basically, the 4 cycles are cycling around in a corner, like around in a circle like this, and it's either counterclockwise or it's either clockwise or counterclockwise. So the next 2 that you'll run into would be the skip cycles, where it's basically the same type of cycle. You're just either skipping this one or you're skipping over this one. So if this edge were to go here and the edge that was here were to go here, you skipped this. So that would be a skip cycle right. So you track that here. You go from here to here to here. You identify you're skipping this one, so you're skipping right. So it's a skip cycle, skipping the right piece. Alternatively, if this piece goes here, this piece goes here, that's a skip cycle because you skip this one, and it's a skip cycle left. So you would use that alg for that case. The final cycle that you run into with the 2-bar algorithms is what I call the X cycle. So that's where you make the picture that you would draw on top here is an X effectively. So if this piece were to go here, this piece were to go here, and this piece were to then go here, you would make sort of an X on the top of the cube here. So that's why I call them the X cycle, and it's counterclockwise and clockwise again here. So, and again, you're just following the first 2 moves. So this piece here, this piece here. That setup, you know, is an X cycle clockwise. X cycle counterclockwise would be the opposite. So you go, this piece goes here, this piece goes here. That's your other X cycle. So follow those first 2 jumps, and that will identify what case you have with those. So hopefully that's not too confusing. It's definitely the most complex case or complex subsection of cases that I have set up for the last 2 corners and really in 2-step on its own. So if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. I'd be happy to go into more detail. It's just a difficult thing to explain basically, but the 2-bar algs just follow the first 2 jumps, and that'll identify what case you've ended up with. So again, guys, that's going to be it for this episode here. If you have any questions at all, leave them in the comments below. Check the description. I have provided all the algorithms that I have for these last 2 corners cases. Again, if you don't have a case that I show an alg for, you can either create your own. That would be awesome. Or you use a setup alg like a T-perm. So if you have a dot case like this, you have a dot and a dot, you set up a T-perm or a wide T-perm to solve some number of edges, and that'll get you to a point where you can solve where you're at a case that you can solve. So hopefully that helps with that. And yeah, any questions, leave them in the comments below. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Bye.